Alright, welcome back to another day in the very long episode of me working on this computer. It's like a week after the last little bit of this. I wound up moving all the stuff into the other room because we decided to reorganize stuff. What I got in here is I've got the radiator for the AIO system. I've got the CPU that I'm going to be changing out since I can't have the two graphics cards in here. One thing that did occur to me while I had downtime was since I'm not going to be able to use the second graphics card in here, I had a different M.2 converter which uses the full 4x bandwidth in this second slot here. So instead of using this little 1x converter, which at PCI Gen 3 would limit me to basically about a gigabyte a second of throughput, which is nothing to sneeze at, it's still pretty quick. On the M.2 drive here, this gives me the full 4x, which means I can do the full, I think this is 32 or 3400 megabytes a second this thing is rated at. So I've also got a little kit with a heatsink I'm going to put on this because heatsinks. Let me do that first because that's going to be the easier one to get to. Pop open this no-name brand off Amazon thing that I purchased. Simple aluminum heatsink. A couple little bands to hold it on and some thermal pad. So peel the clear sticky off one side. That is actually just a little bit short. There's a second one in here. I've got a lovely little X-Acto knife here. This is probably completely unnecessary, but I would rather make sure my coolant is on point. Make sure there's no air bubbles in there. Place our little aluminum heatsink accordingly, and drop a couple of these little relatively thick boy rubber pads or rubber rings they give us. Itty bitty screwdriver for an itty bitty screw. Always keep a hand on these things, they will run away. It's already trying to run away. Alright, we got that locked down, and then once I'm ready, I'll pop that right in that slot, full speed 4x PCIe. Boom! Which means that this second slot down here, which will be completely unobstructed, I can use for the 2.5 gig network. The plan is coming together even though it fell completely apart in the first place. Always retract that, don't stab yourself. I've done that before, it's not fun. In fact, I stabbed myself in the fingernail with a screwdriver just a couple months ago. Not fun. Especially trying to explain to everybody how I managed to stab myself hard enough to draw blood through my fingernail with a screwdriver. What we got next is actually going to be a couple of things. I got to put the new CPU in place, and I am going to try adding the Conductonaut liquid metal. There are also some alcohol pads in here because I will need that to get the stuff off the other one. Also, as opposed to using just regular rubbing alcohol in a paper towel like I usually do, when you're using regular thermal paste, if there's a couple, little fibers from your paper towel or whatnot, it's not going to kill you. No, May, this is not something you can eat. But if you get a couple little fibers in your thermal paste, they'll just absorb into the thermal paste and it's really not going to cause any problems. This stuff, however, liquid metal, you don't really want gunk in it because you don't know what's going to happen to it. Or at least I don't know what's going to happen to it, so I'm going to try and avoid that. Take that off. See if I can slide this over a little bit so I'm actually in camera. Alright, so first thing I got here is I'm going to take this off, which is kind of hard to do on camera because I need both hands. Then I'm going to clean the thermal paste off of it and break into this one and put that on there. So, let's see what I can manage here. Alright, I've got that cleaned off. I've got the tray for the old one. Get this box open. There we go. Ryzen 5 Pro 4650G. Probably can't even see that from there. Drop that in. Boom. Quick tap and put that down. Alright. So, that in there. That in there. There's 3600. Back in the box, ready to do something with. I haven't decided what I'm going to do with that yet. But what we're going to do here is something a little interesting. Or a little craftsy at least. We're going to break out some painter's tape, which is a weird thing to do when you're working on a computer. But I have seen with other people using liquid metal, a trick of using painter's tape to outline your CPU so that you got clean lines and you don't accidentally overflow. But you can also use it to mark where you need to do on the cooler side, because you're supposed to apply the liquid metal to both sides apparently. Using the X-Acto knife for good lines. Those are longer than I need, but they'll work. Cut these down the middle because they're also very wide. So, alright, so if you can see here, I've outlined the square. It's actually just off the edge, or just on the edge of the CPU. I didn't want the rounded corners there because that'd be easy to make a mess, so I brought it in just a little bit so I could have square corners. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to cut out a piece of paper that will fit inside that. Then I'm going to use this Scotch adhesive stuff to put a little bit on there, and then I'm going to seat the cold plate for this in place so it sticks where it's going to have coverage on that, and I know where to outline on that. Fortunately, these come with sharp corners in the first place. So all I got to do is put that in one corner, mark a little notch there, mark a little notch there, and it literally should just be a case of cutting out the lines. Let's see how that fits. That will work. Okay, there we go. We're getting some sticky out of it. I don't want too much sticky because then I'm going to have to clean the sticky off the cold plate. Alright, so that case is going to orient it this way, so I've got the mount this way. Alright, so yeah, that's going to be that way. I got to figure out how to put the feet on that, so I'll be right back. Alright, so I have gotten the hardware mounted to the plate. Now I'm going to take my little doodad here and put some sticky, or is it this way? It's this way. Put some sticky in the middle of that. Set that back in place. Now this will mount going this way. We'll drop this in place. And boom, there's my lines. Working right as advertised so far. So I'm gonna get me another couple pieces of painter's tape here. And now, there we go. Now that doesn't look like there was any sticky on it. Let's break this one out. Make sure we got a clean surface there. And this CPU's clean right out of the box, but might as well run over it since we're doing it anyway. Ooh, shiny copper surface. Shiny copper surface. Who knew that was a tongue twister? Now comes the fun part. I have no experience whatsoever with applying liquid metal paste. Let's see exactly how badly I can do at this. Ooh, I may have got lucky. The plunger kind of gave way, so the plunger gave way on me, but it actually gave me, see if I can close in and focus here, gave me the little like bearing dot size thing they say that you're going to need. So let me see if I can apply this correctly. Alright, so as you can see here, I got it to start smearing instead of just rolling around the surface. So this stuff is supposed to spread very thin. I'm not sure whether or not I'm going to need to apply a little bit, because they also say it soaks into the end of the applicator, and once it's in the end of the applicator, it's easier to spread around. So I'm guessing there's a little bit of absorption done by the applicator. Alright, so I'm going to speed through this part. Okay, I gotta admit, I was not sure it would work, but yeah, that one little dot covered that whole CPU there. So now, let me see if I can hold this. I'm gonna grab my tape and peel it off. 1, 2, 3, and 4. There we go. So I'm assuming, since I had enough to spread it, it may be considered a little bit heavy for what they recommend, but that little gap around the edge gives me some room for it to spread without overflowing into everything. So now to do the same on that one. Oh, now I can use a chair and not kill my back. First I'm going to start off with smearing what's left in the, yeah, that runs out pretty quick. Okay, ooh, I was actually successful in putting a really small dot on there, and I'm gonna work with that. All right, so we went from that one to this one. You can see I got that one good and thin, but spread evenly. That one seems a little bit heavier, so I'm gonna strip this tape off of this one, and we're gonna put the cold plates together. All right. This is kind of a weird association if you've never worked on cars, but having painted cars in the past, look at that tape line. Ooh. Now, we're gonna move this into position and grab a couple of these nuts real quick, because once I put this down, I'm gonna want to secure it so it doesn't slide much. Oh, get on there. All right, that sucker is on there. Now, shortly for the time being, I am going to attach one of these fans to pull through the radiator, just to keep overheating from being an issue while I check the settings on things. I'm attaching these very loosely so that I don't accidentally break anything. I don't want to puncture a radiator. Also doesn't help that I put this on backwards. I need fans pulling through the radiator, not pushing through the radiator. Damn it. Alright, well here's some high-tech debaclery. So in an effort to try and get these screws to bite into the screw hole so I could actually mount the fan, of course it rolled and I stabbed the radiator with a screwdriver. So now I'm trying to flatten out the fins and get them back into shape, hopefully without it starting to leak liquid everywhere. So I'll be back in a few, let you know how it went. All right, well, I've got the fins flattened out as well best I can with what I got. So it looks like air will move through them. I do not know, however, whether or not it's going to start leaking as soon as I turn it on. So I'm going to have to turn it on and see. Oh, damn it. First off, let's take the video card off the top of the power supply. That's probably not a good idea. Second off, let's remember to plug the pump in so that the BIOS doesn't think there's no fans. All right, AIO pump. Let's try this again. Now we got a BIOS at least. All right, so fluid is moving through the fan, through the radiator. I can feel it. I do not see any fluid leaking as of yet. Let's make sure it detects everything. AMD Ryzen 5 4650G. Yep, that looks right. That looks right. It recognizes all 64 gigs of RAM. That's good. All right, so I've got some moderately good going on here. The radiator still does not seem to be leaking any fluid, so I think I just bent some of the fins for airflow and not any of the ones for fluid transfer, which good. Second off, always be careful when using the screws for these things, because the screws in this thing are cheap and they're soft. These are supposed to be tapping screws to tap the holes to hold the fans on, but two of these rounded out and rounded the holes that they were supposed to be mounting to. So I managed to get the fan mounted on two sides, which I haven't screwed down really tight because these screws are just long enough. They're supposed to mount to the metal plate, go through the fan housing and mount to the radiator, and I don't want to poke a hole in anything because that would be bad and I'd have to buy another one of these. I have got, it's recognizing the CPU. I've got the RAM set to its DOCP or its auto clock profile. So CPU ID registers that it's running at its full 3600 megahertz, so that's good. I've got 2 of the drives on there. Actually, that's a good point. Let me turn this off for a second. Grab this bad boy right here. All right, so that is powered off. Get this seated in. There we go. All right, so I got the little red light, so it's getting power. Let's let it boot back into Windows here. Well, first off, let's see if it recognizes automatically. It does. Make sure all these drives for her games and music, her scratch disk, and her projects disk are all formatted at 128K, so we get good speed. Pull up hardware monitor real quick. I don't have a bunch of fans on here real quick, but it should tell me what my temperatures are running at. And we are running at a nice 30C. So down to drivers and setting the BIOS, well, setting the BIOS up, installing the rest of the drivers, and then getting it put in the other case. So I'll leave out the boring bits and get back to you when we get putting it into the other case. All right, so here we are again, another day, and I've got stuff going on here. I'm actually getting ready to put all this in this case. Now, I've already opened the case and taken the front off and unbolted all this stuff, just so I didn't basically have to spend a bunch of time in time lapse. Let's get... I'm mostly concerned about whether or not the CPU power pin that's in this one, because it's an older 4-pin style, although it does have the 4-pin alternate, so hopefully it'll have enough juice to make this work. Now I need to take some of this stuff apart and mount it in the case, so this ought to be fun. One of the things I am going to do is I'm going to mount the cooler in here backwards from how most people do it. Like on my other case, I'm going to be pulling air from inside the case and pushing it out the front. And I've got a fan in the back, and I'm going to look around and see if I have another fan to put on the bottom here to draw air in to push through. Either way, it's got enough ventilation to have air to pull through. So I am going to get started on that, and hopefully it won't take too long. All right, everybody, it has been a few minutes, as you might can tell from the time lapse that I just ran, but I've got everything in here. There was one mildly unpleasant surprise. We're going to have to go with the open floor plan because the video card's too tall to close the side panel. But everything is plugged up. Let's see if everything works. Fans are blowing out the front, that's good. Intake is sucking in there. Intake from the bottom is blowing the air up. Strangely enough, looking through the closet, I found this fan, which is actually one of the fans that shipped with this case. It's been in the closet that long. Ah, there we go. All right, so we got a login screen, that's good. Let's check hardware monitor. Well, it's reading fans blowing. That's definitely a good thing. Let's see what our temperatures look like. We're sitting at a crisp 36C. All right, guys, build portion is pretty much done. I've got the new fans in, I've got the board and everything mounted, everything's working. I've got the studio version of Resolve, which is the most important bit of software installed on here. I am noticing that Resolve does not seem to want to use both of the integrated Radeon graphics and the discrete Radeon graphics at the same time, but oh well. If nothing else, that is set to let me use multiple monitors, so I may be able to plug one monitor into the onboard graphics and just leave the main display on this so the graphics card's only pushing one display. think I mentioned before, I did find a weird little bit that the side panel will not close with this graphics card because the graphics card is too tall. So that's going to be open plan there. I will try and get some benchmark numbers on this for you in a little bit, but I have spent all afternoon scrounging around looking for screws and zip ties and trying to get all this stuff done and trying to figure out BIOS settings. And I'm going to go put this back in place so Melissa can use her computer, and I will try to get some benchmarks numbers to post on the end of this. Other than that, this is at least moderately successful. Liquid metal thermal paste is applied. Got the 240 AIO in there, got some extra fans going, and it's moving. I think with the drive on the 4X slot here, instead of running out of a 1X, it may actually run slightly faster than mine. Boo, I'm supposed to have the big chunky one. Oh well, that just means upgrades later on. Right, anyway, so I am done with this for now. You guys have fun. I'm gonna go put this back in place. If there's some benchmark numbers, I'll post them up in just a second here.